and son-in-law was, they were just with you guys, and he came back with so many stories, so fired up, and he was like, man, the movie was nothing. The last 2 weeks of their life, he was just talking about stuff you've experienced, and that movie gave a little glimpse. But I'm curious, just for all of you, what, because people are dealing with fear right now, what was the most, if you had to say the most terrifying moment of your life? Because I feel.
Okay, so Francis Chan, the guy that claims that everyone I touched was healed in Myanmar, which they like to call Burma, has a lot at stake in making money off this movie. And here he's posing one of those sensationalist questions about, you know, when Eubank and the children were most in fear for their lives. So they're going to tell you about being mortared and all the kind of things that people in my family are in denial about. His daughter even says that, well, you listen.
I saw several of them in the movie, but then I'm going, gosh, that's just such a small thing of when the cameras happen to be rolling. When would you say, man, this was a scary moment? Start with me.
Probably when we were in Mosul during the fight for it.
What was going on that freaked you out?
Freaked you out.
Probably one time an airstrike landed pretty close to us. So.
Okay, now that's pretty serious. An airstrike landed pretty close to this little 10-year-old kid that really shouldn't have been there in the first place. So let's see what the reaction is. There concern, or is there just laughing it off and acting like that's normal to commit felony reckless endangerment of children?
That was pretty scary while we were doing school.
Yeah,
it's pretty funny that he almost got hit by an airstrike. Okay, so let's go on.
I think my scariest moment was probably our first trip to Kurdistan before the battle kicked off. We were really...
Now, for some reference, this is going to assist Farhat Sahin, who David Eubank keeps calling General Mazum Abdi. An ironic name that means oppressed, and it's a terrorist nickname. Trump used this name too, but that's not who he is, and I've come up with a red notice and multiple verifications. It just is who he is, and the Department of Justice has now verified that one of his YPG terrorists was arrested in America for bomb plots, kidnapping plots, murder plots, and was involved in the riots in Washington and a plot in Florida. So she's going to tell you that he took her to the front lines, which he says in the PRI interview, that they're not in danger and he doesn't take them to the front lines. Well, you can already see Peter admitted that he was in danger. So let's hear this next part.
To Kurdistan, and Dad was heading off the front line to teach emergency medical aid and videography.
Okay, so again, her father is the one that took her from still a dangerous school into a more dangerous area that you're going to see she describes as the front lines. Okay? Furthermore, the purpose of this videography is for them to make money, to get propaganda for Islamic and Marxist groups, some of them narco-terrorists. And let's hear what she has to say about how her life is endangered with mortars right in front and behind of her.
He pulled me away from school. Thank you. And asked if
Another important point. She notes that he's taking her to the front lines and pulling her out away from school, but they are adrenaline junkies. Okay, so they really enjoy the emotions and the being scared part, and she's thanking him in true Stockholm syndrome character for taking her to a place where she almost got her head blown off.
Helped teach the videography class to the Peshmerga, the fighters for Kurdistan, their army. And so he went to a more front line position.
Again, she said we went to a more front line position. Well, David Eubank's comment on Public Radio International was that they're not on the front lines and not in danger. So this completely refutes his own statements from his own daughter in front of him and his son, and soon the other daughter, okay, who's crying, bawling about her traumatization through this all.
One of the more forward ones. And it was at a place where you could see the ISIS flags on the hilltops close by.
Okay, now this is another thing that they've misled people about. Those flags are not ISIS flags, which is dramatic and everything, but they're really just the Islamic black standard in the same font that Al-Qaeda used. And this group that Eubank has been urging us to just let go and give them a new start, and saying that he can determine that they weren't serious about fighting and some of them are good guys and there's a spark of good and that they need a new start and let's give them amnesty. Well, his buddy Farhat Sahin, the terrorist, facilitated the release of tens of thousands of ISIS fighters that went on and did a resurgence and killed a lot of people, robbed, raped, etc.
And we were teaching, and then we finished our class, and then ISIS started to mortar our positions.
Okay, now listen to that again. ISIS started to mortar one of our positions. So is this man guilty of felony reckless endangerment? And, using his kids as videographers, not just for the Peshmerga that are not classified as terrorists, but the PKK who are. That fits the child soldiers. So does just being part of any armed group that he's using his children for. That still fits the having her driving the ambulance. That's child soldier definition as well.
Class, and then ISIS started to mortar our positions. They came.
Again.
We're teaching.
Again.
We finished our class, and then ISIS started to mortar our positions.
So I don't want to hear any more denial about how these children are not in danger or for some reason it's all right.
Just like right in front of the position, then they went way behind. And they did that back and forth, kind of just shortening the distance. And I was able to film a little bit of it, and then Dad told me to get in the bunker.
Okay, now think about that. That's the exact way Z, the unpaid ethnic, as Eubank likes to call them, from Burma, died filming for Eubank to make money. How much was that man's life, and how much is putting the lives of his kids at risk for? Is it worth the millions he's made?
He felt they were getting a little bit too close. And
a little bit too close.
In the bunker, I just had this sudden thought, I don't want to be in here. I want to be out there with my dad. If something happens to him, I can't live with myself knowing I was in here and that he was out there.
Now think about the mental head trip this man has put his children in, where they want to run out into a combat area from a more protected bunker, which could still be destroyed and they could be killed. Okay, which she had to retreat into, and she could have been killed on her way in there. As she pointed out, the mortars were going right in front of and behind her and closing in.
And I could see him just out there, right next to the sandbags, watching, and just had a moment of overwhelming fear.
Okay, that is the post-traumatic stress syndrome that he's exposed them to. So even though they did get diseases like malaria, which was avoidable, okay, he has also given them an emotional disease and this Stockholm syndrome and all this indoctrination of this cult. So, they really need to be away from this guy, and he needs to stop endangering them. He needs to be in jail. We need to uphold our laws. So, like she said, the intense emotional wave of fear, the other daughter echoes that too. The other son said how scared he was, and everybody laughed about it, but it wasn't funny.
I needed to run out there and be there in case something happened. And
So now she's feeling guilty because of this weird position that he put his family in.
I felt God say, well, you either trust me or not. And I remembered
Okay, now that's a quote that you hear from these cults, that I felt God say. No, this is just putting the Lord thy God to foolish tests. The kids never should have been there. It's not their fault. It's their father's fault. It's beyond a lack of judgment. It's criminal. And this teaching that you can just make things up that God says and you can feel things that God says, if you want to hear, God's the wrong word, but if you want to hear our Creator speak, then read the legitimate scriptures in an accurate translation and don't twist them around like David Eubank does. This is purely putting the Lord, our deity, to foolish tests.
a quote my dad says a lot. Do not be, if you're afraid, pray for love, because perfect love casts out all fear.
Okay, now, did that help with Z when he got tricked to go do videography, propaganda videos that Eubank personally gained from, and so did the PKK in their unholy alliance? No, it wouldn't make a difference. They shouldn't have been there in the first place.
So I prayed for love, and thank the Lord, they stopped mortaring. They ran out of ammunition for the day, and
Pretty funny.
we all went home safely. And I felt a lot more peace after that.
When our team went to Syria during the Turkish invasion, I remember feeling an overwhelming sense of fear that was...
Okay, there it is. An overwhelming sense of fear. The little boy said that he was scared, that he almost got hit by an airstrike. The second one said that she had mortars landing in front of and behind her, closing in. And she also had this intense wave of fear that Sue, named after the socialist leader of Burma, democratically elected, okay, and all that. And they blamed her, the Nobel Peace Prize winner, for not wanting Rohingya, so-called Rohingya, in their country, raping and killing people, which their religion teaches to do. But you're going to see that she is a mess from what David Eubank put her through.
Almost, I don't know how to describe it, but it wasn't like a sharp fear, but it was something like a tidal wave kept coming over me, and every time I would talk about my dad, I would cry. And even when I heard it, sorry.
Now see, here's another thing that's interesting. They're not really in shock about how they could have died. They're more concerned about their captor, the one he admits that he took his new bride on their honeymoon into Burma illegally to join the resistance to overthrow the government. And you can see a lot of this in his interview with ABC Australia. The title is "The Man Who Willingly Takes His Family to War." He has done felony reckless endangerment with these children and has not been held accountable because he's got a big emotional ploy and portrays himself as a hero, and he's really not. Okay, this is not heroic behavior, and this is a bad example for other people, that you can just go out and make a bunch of money on movies and sensationalizing, doing propaganda for the enemy, and hurt your children. Hurt.
And when I heard his voice, I would cry, and I think it was... so much was going on, and then 1 week or 2 weeks later, Sal died.
Sal was their cameraman, just like she was, and this one, doing videography for this same PKK terrorist group for their propaganda in Syria. A lot of it we've seen on PKK propaganda channels like ANS. or ANF, Farrat News Agency, is the biggest one. That glorifies female suicide bombers. You know, they just had one March 31st that blew up a gas pipeline, and they're supposed to be ecological and they're supposed to be fighting femicide, but you have women blowing themselves up. Crazy.
I don't even know how to describe it. It was an overwhelming. I think it was almost
Like God.
God showing me how much He
Now,
loved.
how was this man almost God? This goes back to the little gods ideology, which Francis Chan, the fake healer, the faith healer, supposedly, he says that ideology. But listen to what she says again: that Z, this guy that got tricked, deceived by Eubank, that the PKK in Syria was the most. How did he say it? The greatest need. Not the people in Iraq that he betrayed. Most of ISIS in Syria are actually from Iraq, and they've been returning there and killing people.
I love those people, and how much like He would send something so precious to me over there. And even now, I don't know really why I'm crying, but it was just an overwhelming sense of fear. And
Again, overwhelming sense of fear. This is post-traumatic stress syndrome. That's what it is. You're not supposed to expose children to gunfire. He admits, quote, I had a bullet come this close to Saheli's head twice. Okay, how is that not your children endangered, not on the front lines? And she just said that they went to the front line position.
continual running back to God and being like, I know You have me in Your hands, and I know You have our team in Your hands. And so I think that that was probably another scary thing that I just can't quite describe the fear to, because it was so supernatural.
Supernatural. So, no, it's not supernatural. What it is David Eubank recklessly endangers his children. And then he gets away with it by misquoting the Bible out of context and saying how great it is of these things that he's doing that are making him rich and advancing terrorist organizations. He's doing that with the ARSA in Burma that he claims is not a terrorist organization, and they're self-admitted jihadists. Amnesty International has refuted him. Human Rights Watch. Okay, these other groups that we don't like, that we know tend to spin things in ways that are enabling towards Islam, like they won't say rape, they'll say forced marriage. You know, they'll say converted and married. They won't use the word about these, quote, Rohingyas doing rape. They'll only use it in the accusations against them, and that is what Muhammad and their religion teaches. Okay, that's what ISIS does, that David Eubank has enabled to do to more people.
I think I'm going to add one story too. Okay.
Okay, now watch. David Eubank glorifying himself. It's not about God. It's about him being a movie star.
Yeah, Syria, we faced, when the Turks and the Free Syrian Army invaded, we faced constant attack. I remember I had a tank. You ever see the movie Saving Private Ryan?
Okay, now, why would he have his children in these positions where they're almost getting killed? That's not what's important to him. What's important to him is comparing himself to Saving Private Ryan movie.
Where the tank turns, the barrel looks at you, and you're like, uh-oh, how did that happen to me?
Drama.
And I saw the red flash, and they were right on me. And I just said, Jesus, help me. And they missed. These are modern battle tanks, should not miss. I was very close.
Okay, now, he's already said that he considers Esau of Islam to be Jesus, which not even from the same name. It's from Esau. Okay, just like the Islamic scholars have admitted.
And many times like that, and many close calls, our position overrun in Syria, fighting for our lives, running for our lives.
And he shouldn't have even been there helping the PKK. Matter of fact, we have videos of one of his guys, Jason, firing at the Turkish counterterrorism, we believe, You know, these groups that are eliminating ISIS and trying to eliminate the PKK. And Eubank is using his children and helping the PKK use other civilians that they refuse to let flee to be human shields, so that it's the same thing that the Palestinians that train the PKK do, okay, the PLO, so-called Palestinians, and the PLPF, okay, the Marxist PLO branch that trained his Marxist PKK leader, whose mentor or protege rather is his quote friend General Abdi, who is really Farhat Sahin, who had terrorist camps in Iraq. He fled to the Netherlands, where they run the biggest narco-terrorist network in all of Europe, providing estimated 80% of all the heroin in Europe, and running the YPG PKK terrorist camp, the Syrian PKK. Our government just finally admitted that, yeah, they are the YPG, are the Syrian branch of the PKK, where they exploit children. They exploit children much worse than David Eubank is exploiting his children, I suppose. You know, kidnapping them and forcing them to be child soldiers. But in a way, that's what he's doing too.
Caring people for their lives. All those were scary in a way, but kind of in a way, if you're on a big wave and you're about to bite it, but you're trying to hold on to it, or you're climbing.
Okay, so here they go with the wave again. This is really their religion. If you listen to the things he says, they're not really about the teachings of Christ at all. They're about how great he is and the emotions and pretending to save all these people that they're actually endangering. You know, and one of the worst things that he could do would be to pray to Allah with Muslims in the name of Isa, because that makes them think that, and apparently he's very confused, or he's just saying this because people will pay for these kind of things to be said. But that's exactly the opposite message of the Bible, that there is no other. The first commandment, and also not to use the names of other deities, and not to do false worship. Okay, so not only is he endangering people and helping terrorist groups, he claims to be supporting the Kurds, but guess who Farhat Sahin has maybe killed more than anybody? Kurdish dissidents, including children. Okay, and their organization kills teachers that don't want to provide the PKK suicide bomber manual.
There's an intensity of action where you're just caught up in the action and you're just going to keep going.
Okay, so I'm not impressed, David Eubank. All three of your children just said that you put their lives in danger. Case closed. In the name of Yeshua.